to the Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. I'm Colin True, and today Kris Hampton is back, and we're going to run through some rock climbing topics that I've had kicking around in my head. You can hear Kris on Written in Stone on the Plugtone Audio Network, the Power Company Climbing Podcast. I mean, what else, man? You're everywhere. We just talked about, you named like 2 other podcasts you worked on. Like, I feel like you're on more shows that I'm not mentioning.
Yeah, Breaking Beta is our science podcast, climbing science podcast, and then the Plugtone Outdoors, which is just an experimental, fun channel.
I want Plugtone Outdoors to come back. That was we talked about that last time. I don't think it made the cut that I put up, but like you had some really fun episodes on that one.
One of these days it'll like reignite.
Well, you're currently like hosting the hottest climbing podcast going right now. So, you know, Plugtone Outdoors, maybe I should put my hopes and dreams aside for that one.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yes, it is. Number one, baby.
But I will say this: I love it when you put on your podcast voice. Like we're chatting, and then you put on your podcast announcer voice, and I get psyched. I love
it. I've been told my whole life, like, you sound like you're on the radio. I'm like, well, I may as well use it to my advantage, I guess. My kids hate it when I talk because I'm loud and verbose. Screw you. This is my only talent.
I love it, man. Keep doing it.
So I have 4 climbing and sort of climbing adjacent topics I want to go through with you today. And some are industry focused, some are a little bit more experience focused. And we talked about when you were on last time that, you know, I don't like calling myself a climber. I like to rock climb, but I don't call myself a climber. But I've also worked in and around the human-powered outdoor industry. I'm trying to add human power to that statement because you're kind of learning that like the outdoor industry is much bigger than what the Outdoor Industry Association claims that it is. And so, you know, I just kind of think of climbing as part of hiking, backpacking, you know, kayaking, you know, whatever, cycling, whatever. But the more lately I've been kind of looking at it, I mean, how big is the climbing industry? I mean, and also, I guess follow up to that is, do you separate indoor climbing from just outdoor climbing? Is it all one big world? I mean, so just what is the scope of the climbing industry?
Wow, I could not possibly give you numbers, but it's big and growing massively and fast. You know, you should pull on someone from the Climbing Business Journal to give you hard numbers. They're always looking into that stuff. And the climbing gym industry, I personally separate the two.
Yeah.
And I think there is quite a bit of separation. I talked with a gym owner in Longmont, Colorado, a couple of years ago, and he told me that they did a poll with all of their members. These are the people who pay a monthly or yearly membership. So not the people just coming in to visit for a birthday party or whatever. And that 2% of them had climbed outside. This is in Colorado.
Okay. I think this is kind of what I'm getting at. Like, I didn't expect you to come in armed with like a bunch of numbers, but it just, I didn't quite understand the scope of how big climbing had gotten. And kind of to our conversation, like the last time we were here, when you think about how kind of, you know, the badass perception of rock climbing, indoor or outdoor, it just still feels almost like niche in a way, like compared to going hiking or something like that. So to think, when I start seeing things like, you know, the industry you just mentioned, you know, the Climbing Wall Association. I wrote on our outline, what the hell is the Climbing Wall Association? I didn't know this thing existed. And but then also it doesn't really surprise me, to your point, you know, like a 98-2 ratio of climbing indoor versus outdoor. Because I got to think that, like, how many people go climbing in a gym and never even would consider going climbing outside?
Yeah, it's almost become a piece of the fitness industry as opposed to the outdoor industry. I think the climbing gyms are at a unique spot where there's a lot of crossover in both industries in the gyms. Yeah. But I think it's overwhelmingly becoming more and more fitness industry.
Is there any strife in the climbing world? Is there any of that the outdoor climbers like loathe the gyms and that sort of thing? There
are a couple of different ways this goes. Number one, we talked about this a little last time, like the disgruntled older generation of climbers who are like, gyms used to look this way and you used to be able to train better for outdoor climbing.
That's my next thing is climbing gyms then versus now, because I saw something online about that this week, but keep going.
Yeah, so they hate the new variety of gym. The way commercial gyms mostly look now. There's sort of a template of sorts, and
Sure.
they complain about it a lot. There's also the side of, if we're inviting more people into the gym and introducing them to outdoor climbing in some way, now they're overrunning the crags and it's worse for the environment, and the base of the crag is getting worn away faster, and so our boulder fields are getting more crowded. So there's all of this as well. And I'm conflicted on all of those counts.
You're being very diplomatic right now. And as someone who owns multiple climbing companies, I understand why. I do think the climbers and the surfers need to get fucked a little bit. Like, come on, guys. Like, more people doing the activities is better for humanity in the world. Yes, there are logistical concerns that come with everything you're describing. And I think it's more the hipster mindset of like, I was here first, or I was doing this before it was cool, that it is actually any real, especially look at the numbers you just quoted, 2% of people who are in a gym not going outside. Who are the people overrunning the crags?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think number one, if you're like posting on your Instagram, this is so cool, I'm so cool because I go outdoor rock climbing.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, but you're not allowed to like it. That sort of like elitism, gatekeeping, I'm not a big fan of at all. And I think we're bringing in more money. We're bringing in smart people who, have ties that we can use. Like, there are lots of groups going out and now lobbying Congress to make make rock climbing a legitimate part of these laws that were written, 100 years ago or whatever. So that doesn't happen if it's just the hipster lawbreaker, the like old school style of what a rock climber looks like. That doesn't happen. Luckily, we're bringing more people in, more money in. I think it's a good thing, ultimately.
Ultimately, it is. I mean, well, I'm more on the industry side. So then I discovered the Climbing Wall Association as an actual kind of trade association that has its own trade show. And the reason I bring this up isn't just to say, wow, isn't that amazing? But we're in this weird world right now when it comes to trade shows and events and kind of industry-style events. And, I went looking at the trade show, which is going to be in May. I think it's in Portland. And you see some of the brands that are going. And look, it's a lot of the brands that no longer go to outdoor retailer. And then I kind of put that under the lens of, okay, you have OR still trying to be OR. You have people like the Big Gear Show who are, doing their thing. But then at the same time, these more, kind of category-specific shows are popping up, right? I mean, Sea Otter's been around forever, but that has become known as now the de facto cycling event. Functional Fabric is happening in Portland. That is a materials, a designer event. The running event in Austin, who's been dabbling in more outdoor stuff, but that's a running specific event. And now you have a climbing wall trade show with
there are two
Scarpa.
Now, actually.
There are two of them? Okay.
There was a new one just in December in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a new indoor climbing trade show. So it's a big business.
And if you're a retailer, take the outdoor versus indoor, top conversation aside, because the stuff's all the same: harnesses, shoes, ropes, whatever, right? So who cares where you're using it? If you pedal in climbing, you would go probably to one of these shows now, even if it is more indoor specific. So I don't know, how does that kind of shake out? I mean, do you go to these shows? You ever been to one of them?
Yeah, I went to CWA. I've got an episode on my podcast from several years ago with the woman who was like the director of the CWA at the time. Mm-hmm. For me, as a coach, working with people, who are spending a lot of their time in gyms, it was far more valuable to go to the CWA than it was to go to OR. OR had just gotten so big and so complicated and convoluted and stressful, and going to the CWA, which was much smaller, easier to have, face-to-face conversations without making appointments, easier to just meet people. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed the CWA for a few years, and I think it's a different thing to be able to, yes, when you go to OR, there's like this is the climbing section, this is the paddling section, But going into a room that's all climbing gym based, where you get to see all of the new holds that people are creating that go into the gyms, all of the new boards that people are putting together, all of this new technology that's coming in to support this gym world that's just blowing up. It's just so much more valuable for the person who's in that indoor climbing industry.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this topic, the industry specifically. Like we had Sean Smith from Outdoor Retailer on a few months ago. I'm chatting with some folks from the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable later this week. And these are kind of the conversation. It's how we gather. Everybody seems to agree that gathering is important. And I think it's important. And if there was a big national show, I think that'd be, if there's a way to do it, that's great. But it does still feel to me that a lot of folks are trying to well, how do we just get back to the way it used to be? And there's just all these breadcrumbs that are saying it's never gonna. It's just not gonna happen. There's got to be a new way to do it. All right, well, we'll keep an eye on that. I think the next thing, though, kind of leads into it, and you touched on it a little bit, is the kind of climbing gyms then versus now. So I was tracking a conversation you weighed in on Threads this week, and someone floated the idea that climbing gyms were worse now than they used to be. And again, it's not a sort of core climber. Anybody making that argument. I mean, you talked about, you heard last time about how climbing gyms, the shirtless dude was defensible in old school climbing gyms because there was no air conditioning, right? This is sort of these kind of crappy, gyms that it was, were not necessarily a nice place to exist in. So what is the background of this exchange? Is it just that sort of like hipster, I was doing this before you, it was cooler back then kind of vibe?
Yeah, that's part of it. But there's also the gyms are fundamentally changing in the way that they look, the holds that are on the wall, the way the walls are built have fundamentally changed, and changed for the better in large part. The big, the underlying feeling that was posted on Threads, and I think that was originally posted by Crisp Shawarma, who is an instigator and likes to instigate these things, and I appreciate that about him. But the underlying tone there is that there are all these grumpy old climbers who liked when climbing in the gyms was trying to look more like climbing outside. So tweaky little holds and, just more in the style of outdoor specific climbing. Climbing has gone more and more toward at least indoor climbing, the style you see in the Olympics, which is a little more like parkour, much more fun to watch, no question, but maybe doesn't transfer as well to outdoor climbing. So they're grumpy about that. And it's harder. It's tricky, I go in there to do some of these boulder problems that are put up in gyms nowadays, and it's hard. It's not what I've trained in for 25 years. So I go in there and I feel like a beginner, and that's a blow to my ego, and that's what's happening to a lot of these guys.
All right, let's talk about the activity itself, because I want you to put your coach hat on, because this is a little self-serving. It's something I've been thinking about as I try to balance, all the things that I want to do, plus get time in, because my daughter and I like to climb with each other and things like that. And I guess this is a little bit of an obligatory New Year's fitness question. So climbing as strength training. So because climbing's sort of the only outdoor sport where muscles and strength really play a key role. Everything else is kind of more on the endurance side, even like kayaking, things like that. It's more of an endurance style activity. And, I've always been frustrated by my endurance friends who all they do is run or bike, right? And then you see the folks who are, whose age I'm kind of rapidly approaching, who, they're happy to carry that little belly because they're not doing any strength training, right? And it's just, they can ride their bike for 6 hours and crush you on it. But, the overall fitness, everyone will tell you, hey, strength really is important. So is bouldering or climbing in the gym enough of a strength building experience for those who sort of don't want to go to the gym to just lift or do strength training in your experience?
I'm going to get a little deep in the weeds in this question because you asked me to put my coach hat on, so it's on.
I'm going to take notes, so I'm going to get a free. I'm not charging. I'm not paying you for this.
I think as a general fitness activity, it's probably better than a lot of the fitness industry type of activities for people who want to be challenged in a lot of different ways, as opposed to, you're going to get more bang for your buck, absolutely, if you just go lift weights. If you
right,
go
you can
to
do that for like
CrossFit
15
gym,
minutes, right? And really do some work there. I got you. Okay.
Yeah, you're going to get more bang for your buck. You're going to be able to load heavier. You're going to be able to challenge yourself more specifically. And, as an aging adult, that's what you are. That's what I am.
Oh, yeah.
I do think that strength training is really important. Like really lifting heavy things, moving heavy things, I think is really important for us in terms of longevity. Is climbing and bouldering strength training? I would say not really, but it can help you get stronger. If you're starting from a pretty low base of upper body strength, it's going to probably help. I don't think it's a complete strength training program. I think you should probably be doing some other things, moving some heavy things around to benefit yourself the most. Is it the most fun way? Fuck yeah. For me, it certainly is.
All right, so last thing to talk about, and this is one we'll probably end up talking about the most, because you wanted me to listen to this episode, and I did. So the episode of the Power Company Pod, which compared Taylor Swift to the climbing industry, which, by the way, regardless of anything we're about to talk about, good for you. More of this, please. I love. Let's take one thing and compare it to something that seemingly on paper has nothing in common, and let's find the commonalities. I love it. But you referenced that it was you came onto it because of the move about a year ago when Eddie Bauer laid off their climbing team. What made you really want to talk about this on the pod? What was sort of the impetus? Was it the Eddie Bauer move?
Yeah, it was the complaining from the athletes. Like, this is the way it used to be, and we want it to remain that way. That's sort of the whole feeling I got from all of these climbers who were complaining about the climbing team being disbanded. And most of the people I know were like, Eddie Bauer had a climbing team? Yeah. We didn't know that, Well,
they're a really interesting case because I'm sure, you know this, that team came together when Peter Whitaker took over and created First Ascent, and they were building stuff for alpinists, for guides. So they brought in a bunch of guides to influence it. And when I saw that, we definitely talked about it on the show. I kind of felt like that's kind of amazing it lasted as long as it did, frankly. Yeah,
so ultimately it was just the whole feeling of this is the way it used to be. We're sick of things changing. We want it to be the old way. That's the feeling I got from everybody.
Constant theme in our space, isn't it?
Yeah.
So my takeaway was I thought the comp was great. As always, well-produced, sounded great. The music clips were fantastic. Felt like I was listening to 60 songs that explain the 90s. You absolutely crushed the sound design,
I fucking love that
usual.
Podcast.
Isn't that a great pod? No free ads, but I'll give you one, Rob Harvilla. That's such a great podcast.
Yeah, he's so good.
I think you got the comp wrong. I think it's not Taylor Swift. I think it's Casey Neistat. Because it's more these people, at least, music artists, even, or just artists in general, they have to create something. And I think what's changed is, because now that, the days are gone, right, of the people just looking for people to bankroll their adventures. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, that was a real thing, right? Just back to Outdoor Retailer. I mean, what was the percentage of people just wandering the halls at that show being like, hey, I'm going to climb a mountain next year. You want to pay for it? And a lot of brands being like, yeah, we do. Like, that was the way it was for a little while there. But you have to, I feel like the folks these days who are successful, don't you have to be kind of something good at something other than your activity, right? You got to be a content creator, a TikToker. You got to be able to make YouTube videos, things like that. And I wonder if those are the folks we're really going to see continue to rise to the top here as we go forward.
Yeah, I think they are. And I think that's sort of the point. And that's why I chose Taylor Swift, because, I think Casey Neistat has always played that game. As far as I knew, he wasn't someone who played the old game in the old system.
Right.
And then transferred into this new system and was like, okay, we're going to drop everything we know from the old system and do it this new way, even better than we were doing it in the old system. And, to be clear here, I didn't know shit about Taylor Swift. Other than the music industry part of it. Like, I didn't know her songs at all. I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, but I have several friends who are Swifties and like super fans. So I hit up my friend Lauren and was like, all right, here's the way my podcast is going to look. Give me the lyrics that I should go looking for, so I can punch in some Taylor Swift songs. And she and her Swiftie crew came back with this massive Google Doc of songs I needed to listen to. So, but I think what Taylor Swift did really well was she worked in the old system.
Yeah. I see.
Yeah, this label is owning my music. They're giving me a loan. I'm dependent on them to put the music out there, to distribute it, everything. I go make the music and they do everything else. And now she's switched over to this model of, I'm going to own all the music. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to build relationships with my fans and put out my own things. And I really appreciate that, especially on a major scale like that, where she could still be really successful in the old way.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You're right. The way you have to do it now versus the way you could do it before. And, I put an example in our document. So Kelia Moniz, if I'm saying that incorrectly, I apologize. Someone can correct me. myrockfight@gmail.com. Send me an email. But she's a pro surfer. And this literally, as you and I were texting about what to talk about in this episode, I saw this pop up in one of the kind of trade rags. And she I signed with Roxy when she was like 13 or 17. Mm-hmm. She was really young. And she just ended her relationship because, and this is kind of the next part of the conversation I want to have, which I think is interesting. That episode really made me think about the way this has all gone. So she ended the relationship with Roxy. Roxy was just acquired was recently acquired by, I think it was Authentic Brands, and basically ended her contract and then offered to re-sign her at like 90% of the value of the contract. And she's just like, nope, not doing it. I know my value. I'm going to go do my own thing. And I think that's where it's an interesting play because, and I'm not, again, I don't want to speak for specifically the climbing industry, as we talked about at the beginning. It's much larger than I'm even familiar with, but at least on kind of more the kind of snow, trail-based sports, like the big brands, who used to throw out who had the opportunities to give out these sort of, endorsements and ambassadorships and things like that to folks who could actually then make a living doing the things they like, except for Patagonia. They're all pretty much owned by some publicly traded entity now. Yeah. This is kind of, it's not one for one, but it's a little similar to Eddie Bauer. Like, they changed strategy. And to your point about the people who are kind of looking at it going, oh, I wish it was the way it used to be. It's like, that's kind of naive, man. Like, the way it used to be was the 90s and early 2000s when everything going on outside was about as cool as it could get. And people were making money off of this stuff. Yep. It's just not like that anymore. Yeah,
the like parallel between Taylor Swift and this was that back then in the old model, the music was the product. That's what we paid for. We went to the store and we bought a CD, and we, if once we ruined that CD, we had to go buy another one, and they made money off that as the product. Now with streaming, we think unlimited music costs $6 a month. That's our new ethos. Can that $6 be split up between all of the musicians we're streaming? No way. So there has to be a new model. What's the new product? If the music isn't the product, you have to create something else. You have to create relationships with these people. You have to give them new things. That's what they're paying for. You have to go out and see the people. People are now paying for the relationship with the person they want to hear from. I think that more and more that's the case.
So in that episode, and just again paying a little bit of closer attention since we started kind of talking about doing this episode, you guys name drop a bunch of folks who I have no idea who they are, like in terms of like the hot climbers of the day, right? The people who are really popular, have followings, things like that. Mm-hmm. Because I kind of think of it as like when you look across the board, I don't really know who is that these days. Who are the names these days? Like back in the 90s, you say like Alex Lowe or Conrad Anker, these people, they really seemed like they could almost bridge the gap into mainstream. Probably not, but like probably closer because the way things were marketed, things people understood. Now, though, I mean, isn't a random TikToker just as likely to have like the content that you're interested in? I mean, even in like the cycling world, it's almost like the people who and mountain bikes who are doing kind of comedy segments, or Seth from Burn Peak, who's like a more of a tutorial guy in a lot of ways, right? Those are the people I think people are looking towards. So I mean, is there even the opportunity? I guess what I'm getting at, to like kind of have make money doing this from a brand? Why would you even want to go that route?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Like, I don't see a lot of upside to being beholden to companies anymore. You are your own brand now.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, right? With the Casey comp, right?
Yeah, you have all of the channels to create your own brand. You're using the same channels those businesses are, those big companies are, So the distribution model is no longer viable. It's not like you go out, you have your adventure, they pay to make a film, and they distribute it widely because they can.
Yeah.
Now it's almost free to just distribute things to everybody that you can get to watch it. So, there are obviously there's the Alex Honnold. He's going to be probably the most famous climber on the planet right now. And he's not just sitting on that. He's not just saying, okay, I've got these sponsors paying me money. He's making a podcast, with the folks at Duct Tape Them Beer.
Yep.
He's also hosting a bunch of other podcasts. He's diversifying all these. He's getting a bunch of different income streams, putting himself out there. He's maybe the best example I've ever seen of someone who is awkward as hell to talk to in person when he first came onto the climbing scene.
Right.
And he's learned to talk to the media. Like, he's learned to be his own brand. And he's capitalizing on that. And so are all the best climbers in the world are doing the same thing. The Adam Ondra probably, I'm not even sure you can debate that he's the best climber in the world right now. And he's got a really successful YouTube channel that puts out really incredible content over and over. He's not waiting for, his sponsors to bankroll his videos. He's doing it himself and reaping the benefits of that. And he's got all these other things going on. And Chris Sharma has multiple gyms now that are his gyms.
And he's a terrible host of a TV show.
That's pretty accurate. Yeah. He's
I've said that
branching
publicly
out
on this podcast before. So
for sure. Chris was, maybe Jason Momoa was the weakest link in that show.
Megan was sitting right there. They had Megan Martin right there.
We appreciate you, Megan, for doing what you did coming into that
frustrating.
show.
So anyway, sorry.
So all of these people, the best climbers in the world, are doing it. And then we've got tier 2 and 3 athletes over on the Eddie Bauer team complaining that they're not getting paid enough to continue to have their selfish adventures. That's what tipped me off into this, I'm going to have to make a Taylor Swift episode.
I love it. I just look, if anything, we're living proof of this conversation right now. The world is now set up in a way that you can do it. Right. And it's easy to do. Right. You don't have, the quality doesn't matter quite as much, and the ability, everything's on your phone. If you just want to do anything you can do is basically on your phone if you really put your head to it. And there's always going to be exceptions. Right. I mean, there's always going to be the Honolds or the people who are, just Sharma's a great example given where he started and where he is now and kind of bridging that gap. I'm sure he still has sponsors, but it's. And in the future, there'll be somebody else that a company will invest in. Or you can just really invest in yourself. And if you really want to do this and make a career out of doing just these things, the tools are all just laying there for you to use. Versus 20, 30 years ago, all you could do was troll the halls at Outdoor Retailer and hope that somebody would pay for you to go do something. One
of the things that really frustrates me is the conversation around outdoor influencers. And I'm not talking about the just a random hot girl who goes and stands in a field of sunflowers or something like that.
Opens up the back of the van, in Malibu or something, right?
But the climbing influencer world has gotten a lot of flack, and we're getting a ton of it from these Eddie Bauer athletes who had been dropped But ultimately, your job as an ambassador for this company is to get people to look at the company. And if these influencers who don't climb as hard as you and don't go out on these adventures like you are doing a better job at your job than you are, then of course they should be the ones who are getting the job. You know? So for me, I'm like, if an influencer is going to do a better job at coaching people or at telling the stories of climbing history than I am, then they should get that money. So I'm going to work my ass off to make sure that doesn't happen. And I'm going to cultivate relationships and build my own brand so that I have an audience who will follow me to this next thing that I'm going to do.
Right.
Just like these influencers are doing, frankly.
And also, you know what used to happen, like back in the day, like there weren't influencers or sponsored athletes, and everyone would work like a construction job for like 4 months and save up a bunch of money and then go have adventures. And that option's still on the table, by the way. Like you can still go do that. You know?
Yep, absolutely.
I think we could wrap it up there, man. I think we got it. So what else you got going on, man? How many more episodes are lined up for Written in Stone right now?
I wish I could answer that question. The season was supposed to be 20 total episodes, and we're already at episode 16, and I'm only to 1992. And we're going through the whole 90s. It
was 20 for the... So, are you including all the interviews too, you mean? Or
Yeah.
Well, how many of the actual, like, 30-minute spots have there been? Like, the actual, like, your narrative pods. How many have you done? Okay,
we're halfway. There have been 5. So, halfway through. We've got, I think, 6 more of those.
Okay. I'm so glad it's going great for you, man. And what's going on over at Power Company?
Power Company is in flux right now. I'm like, I'm changing the format of the podcast a little bit, not a ton. I want it to be a little more like, are you familiar with Armchair Expert and that whole business they've got over there, where they've got a bunch of different series that happen on their one channel. Mm-hmm. Power Company is going to morph into something a little more like that, where there are a couple of different threads you can follow, all related around becoming a better climber.
All right, man. Well, we can wrap it up there. Thanks for coming on again. We'll have to do this again soon.
Yeah, man. Let's do it. I'm excited to hear more of your podcast voice.
I got plenty of that. Don't worry. Thanks, Kris.
Thanks, man.
Thanks as always to Kris Hampton for coming on the show. All of his shows are linked in the notes, including the specific Taylor Swift episode of Power Company Climbing, so check them out. We'll be back with at least one more episode later this week, and be sure to head over to rockfight.co and click Your Mom to get the latest from Rockfight's blog. The Rockfight is a production of Rockfight LLC. I'm Colin True. Thanks for listening, and here to take us out is Kris DeMakes, who spells Kris differently than Kris Hampton. And Kris DeMakes is going to play the Rockfight fight song. We'll see you next time, Rockfighters. Rockfight!